So when I'm talking about structure of atom, structure of atom. See, how did the study of chemistry come about? How did the study of chemistry come about? Initially, we had what we call as alchemist. Real what you call breakthrough in chemistry was not done by chemists. They were done by a set of people called as alchemists. Now, why alchemists are not called as chemists is because their aim was not to study what you call chemistry as such. They had only one single aim in life. Whatever things that was available to them at that time, from plant source, animal source, earth source, anything, they tried to mix all of them and tried to obtain or convert these material into gold, so that they wanted to become instant rich. This is clear. One thing is they did not succeed, but they did leave us with a lot of what you call material, some scientific, some unscientific, which then the later on people carried over, and that then turned out to be a complete subject of chemistry. Is this clear? So now one of the thought that the scientist had was, what will happen if we go on dividing matter? So first we start with this point. What do you mean by the word matter? The word matter means any substance which has got mass, any substance which has mass and occupies volume is called as matter. Okay. Now they thought that if we go on dividing this matter, what is the final stage that it will reach to? The final stage they realized, they decided at one point it will become indivisible. That was your thought process, that at one point it will become indivisible. You just cannot divide it further. So what they did was they called that indivisible particle as atom. So what are atoms? Atoms are indivisible. Atoms are indivisible part of matter. Now what was the reason that they called it as atom? The reason was simple. This was obtained from the Greek word atomos. Greek word atomos. So atomos in Greek means indivisible. Atomos in Greek means indivisible. The Greek culture, the Greek and the Arabic culture, today Greece is not a very wealthy country. Arabs of course are wealthy for some other reason, but in the ancient times, the Greek and Arab culture have contributed, their alchemists and subsequent chemists have contributed a lot to chemistry, which today you find that Germans and Americans contribute. Is this clear? So from the Greek word atomos, what happened? This word, the smallest indivisible particle of matter, was called as atom. Now based on this, what happened was, there was this scientist by the name Dalton, and Dalton proposed what? Dalton's atomic theory. Dalton proposed Dalton's atomic theory. So what were the statements of his theory? The first and foremost, he said that smallest indivisible particle of matter is atom. Then what did he go about describing what an atom is? He said atoms are he said atoms of the same element, atoms of same element are similar. And third is, he said atoms of different elements are different. Now you see, it is not just that Dalton did not have opposition to what he said, because one of the most simplest chemical change, which we now know as chemical change, is clear, was fire, burning, combustion. From age immemorial, people have seen combustion taking place. So that we know today as a chemical change. So we are distinctly aware of physical change and chemical change. So with that as an example, when they asked, what is this? Dalton said in his theory that chemical change, he said it's a chemical change. But he said chemical change is nothing but rearrangement of atoms. He said chemical change is nothing but rearrangement of atoms. So you won't believe that for about 50 years, while many other researchers were taking place, nobody challenged Dalton's atomic theory that atoms are indivisible. Now, people were doing some other work, and then they stumbled upon this idea. And what was the work that they were doing? See, by that time, electricity had been discovered. They had realized two things. Scientists, those fellows physicists who were working on electricity, realized two things. What are the two things that they realized? First is that metals conduct electricity. Why it conducts electricity, that is not known. So it conducts electricity was a fact that they were aware of. And solutions conduct electricity. And some substances in their fused state conduct electricity. So the physics part of the science had made a major advancement in about electricity. Faraday was one scientist who tried to explain that there is something called electrons, but it was a theory, because Faraday's laws of electrolysis was proved to be right. It's a law, but it was empirical. He didn't know why. We know now why it is so. So Faraday made a very, very feeble attempt to explain that, there is flow of current and electricity because of electrons. What is the source of electron? What is an electron? Nothing Faraday could tell. It was just left, as we said, for the future generation to come up with an idea. The first indication where they tried to break the myth of indivisibility of an atom this was done by Julius Plucker. I said, now what happened was the physicist, one of the scientists, physicist was Julius Plucker. Now this Julius Plucker in 1889, now he was trying to study something very interesting, because he realized now, by the time the physics world had realized at that time that there is something which is a conductor and something which is a non-conductor of electricity. And air was coming in the category of a non-conductor. So he wanted to see why is air not conducting electricity. This is what we call a scientific temper, an attitude to question why it is not conducting electricity. So what Julius Plucker did was, Julius Plucker he did an experiment. What is the experiment he did? He took a glass tube, very thick glass tube. That's very important. You will ask me, sir, why it should be a thick glass tube? Is because we are applying vacuum, low pressure. If the walls of the glass tube is thin, it will just crumble and fall down. So, I mean, we are telling the final thing what he did. Maybe he went through all this pain and anguish and then came to this conclusion. It should be a very thick glass tube which had this outlet for vacuum. So, I mean, in our day-to-day life, we do come across vacuum. Where do we come across vacuum? We have a vacuum cleaner at home, na? Plucker. Now, what happened? Julius Plucker, he took a glass tube, thick glass tube, okay, and then he connected two electrodes. And then he connected this to vacuum to a high vacuum pump. Means high vacuum means, see, vacuum is measured in a unit called as torr. Torr. This word torr comes from the name, so the unit is torr. The unit torr comes from the name of Vincent Torricelli, an Italian scientist who studied about air, vacuum, pressure and all that. So in thermometers you have Torricelli's vacuum, and the unit of low pressure is torr. So 1 torr is 1 millimeter. Is this clear? So if you have 10 raised to 1000 torr, 1000 torr is about 10 raised to 3 torr. That's considered to be a very low pressure. Is clear? So around 1000 torr to 10,000 torr, they had that kind of machine, fortunately at that time, to pull all the air. So most of the gas, now understand one thing, when you apply vacuum, you are not clearing off all the gases. A very small amount of residual gas will still be there. That's important for our discussion. So when you apply vacuum, what happens? A very small amount of residual gas is there. So what is pressure of a gas, we normally say? Pressure of gas is defined as the number of particles hitting against the surface of container. So if you remove most of the air, what happens? Very few particles are still left, they hit the surface of container. So when very few particles hit the surface of container, automatically it means it's low pressure. Or low pressure we also call as vacuum. And then he connected this to an electrical thing of about nearly 10,000 volt. This was nearly 10,000 volt. And he did one more thing. See, why he did that, we don't know. But what he did was, so this was your cathode and this was, so this is negative and this is positive. So from the anode, so this cathode, this is anode. So from the negative, it appeared, I am using the word appeared, as if some invisible rays were coming out. We will correct it that it is not coming out. And what he did was, here, so this is black. I don't know what made him think, but then this is what he did. He coated this end. He coated this end of the glass tube with a zinc sulfide. So he coated with zinc sulfide. I have space, I can write over here. Zinc sulfide is a fluorescent material. That means when light falls on it, since it gives a green color, that's why I put a green here. He coated it. Now, how could he say that some invisible rays are coming out? Because this zinc sulfide screen fluoresced. the zinc sulfide screen fluoresced. Is this clear? That means gave out light. But he was not able to see any light coming out from here. He was not able to see any light coming out. So he announced to the world that there is some invisible rays which are coming from the cathode and moving towards the anode. Moving towards the... Now he called this as cathode rays. He called this as cathode rays. Now what happened was, Thomson came in. Now Thomson made a correction. See, this is where, even today people think there's something coming from the cathode. There is something, no, nothing is coming from the cathode. It is clear. So, this thing, what Thomson said was, this Thomson, in about 18, J.J. Thomson, he made a correction. So, J.J. Thomson in the year 1896, so it took quite some time, 97 years. So J.J. Thomson said that there is nothing coming out from the cathode. What is actually happening is that at this very low pressure and at this very high potential difference, he said that whatever is the gas inside, suppose you have some residual hydrogen gas. This is a hydrogen molecule. Hydrogen gas will be in the molecular form H2. So this hydrogen molecule splits to form, so this is a molecule. It forms a hydrogen atom. And then at this potential difference, it simply splits. It dissociates. It forms H plus ion and an electron. He said nothing is coming from the cathode. Nothing is coming from the cathode. It is clear. So, nothing is coming from the anode to the cathode. Nothing. Nothing is coming from here. He said what is happening is that the dissociation of the atom is creating what? It is creating an ion. That ion also was not there. He said that is creating a particle which is negatively charged. We know now that it is splitting of the atom into a cation and it gives electron. So this word electron was introduced by Thomson. So he said electrons are coming from the anode and moving to the cathode. So that is how the word electron got introduced in chemistry. So nothing came from the anode, nothing came from the cathode. Is this clear? What was actually moving was electron. So this was a major revolution in chemistry, because the myth of indivisibility of an atom was broken. 50 years it took. 50 years Dalton's theory was prevalent that the most indivisible particle of matter is atom. So here they said atom has got a particle called electron. We call this as subatomic particle. We call this as subatomic particle, particle less than an atom. So now, having come to cathode rays is an electron, is this clear? What are the properties? Now, they said it is rays. But then they wanted to know the nature of this, whether it is a ray, because when you say a ray, it is an electromagnetic radiation like light. It has no mass, it will have wavelength, it will have frequency and all that. Whereas if it has a particle, then it will have mass, it will have kinetic energy and all that. So therefore, they decided to study the properties of the cathode rays, which now we call as electron. So what was the property of cathode rays which they realized? First and foremost, so this will be a question in your college exam probably. So we are talking about properties of cathode ray. First and foremost property they realized was that it moves in a straight line. So this was their observation, that cathode rays move in a straight line. So what did they do? One small change they did and saw that instead of the cathode being here, they kept the cathode over here. They kept the cathode over here. They realized that it was deflecting towards the cathode. Normally it moves in a straight line. That means there is an influence of electric and magnetic field. So the second point they realized was that electric, it was affected, cathode rays, let me make it very clear. Cathode rays were affected by electric and magnetic field. The third thing is what they first saw, that cathode rays will fluoresce in zinc sulfide. It lights up the zinc sulfide screen, a green color. So it produces cathode rays. The correct statement will be cathode rays produce fluorescence when it comes in contact with that time they knew only zinc sulfide. Nowadays we know many fluorescent material. It is clear. All the road signs which you see red in the stop, this, that. If in the night when there is no street light, if you focus you can see it gives out A. They also put strips of fluorescent material behind the truck and all that. So when you put light, it gives a fluorescent P, so you know some vehicle is ahead. Nowadays we know, those days they knew only this property for zinc sulfide. Then, but up to now, whatever story we were saying or what property they found could not help the scientists to decide whether cathode rays is a particle or it is an electromagnetic radiation. So what they did was, they placed in between. See, it's very simple. If light is falling on me, light has no mass, so it's not going to make me move. Na? You got the point. But suppose if a very big stone, it comes and hits me, it has got mass, it has got kinetic energy. If it is thrown at me and it collides, I will at least move. So the impact will cause. So when there is a substance which has got a mass, its impact will cause movement. It's because of transference of energy. So whether to judge whether it is so if you have to judge whether it is electromagnetic radiation, light, or it is a particle, what Thomson did was, Julius Plucker came out, much of this work was done by Thomson only. So what he did was, he kept a spindle in between. If it is light, it would not move. But what he realized was, the spindle was moving. So if spindle was moving, automatically what are you coming to the conclusion? That whatever is coming out, or what, not coming out, whatever is the cathode ray present, it has mass. Because it has mass, it has got kinetic energy half mv square. And because of that kinetic energy, when it collides, it is able to move the spindle. So the fourth point was the point which was decisive, which helped the scientists to realize that these cathode rays have mass. They are particle in nature. So what they said was, the fourth property was, cathode rays could move a spindle, metal spindle, could move a metal spindle placed in its path. So if it could move a metal spindle placed in its path, what is the conclusion at the back of our mind we are making? The conclusion that we are making is that it has a particle nature. It has a particle nature. So what is it doing? It is having kinetic energy. That kinetic energy during collision is getting transferred and making the spindle to move. One more important property they realized at that time. I told you, at that time the scientists, the physicists were doing more work. Their grasp on light, electromagnetic radiation was very good. So one thing they realized was that when cathode ray, when you put in some metal in between, when you put certain metal in between cathode ray, they realized that the collision created X-rays. So they realized that cathode rays, how will I put it? Cathode rays collided with certain metals. Cathode rays collided with certain metals and produced X-rays. This is very, very important statement for us now, because later on Moseley used this idea to propose what we call as the modern periodic law, that the periodic property of an element is a function of its atomic number. So how he used this concept? Listen carefully. So what happened was, cathode rays collided with certain metal and produced X-rays. This is a very important point, because this was used by, as I told you, Moseley, and he wrote the, he stated the modern periodic law. Now this was about, and then he said that this cathode ray is nothing but a particle coming out of the atom, and this particle is electron. And all electrons are the same from any element. Why he said that was because this he said, and then when he said that, they went on to do some experiments. Is this clear? So the moment he said that this is a particle, two things come in your mind. What are the two things that come in your mind? The moment you say it's a particle and it is getting affected by external magnetic and electric field, it has a charge and it has a mass. It has a charge and it has a mass. Charge is measured in the unit of coulomb and mass is measured in grams or kg. So that is what Thomson set next to do. Is this clear? I'll give you 2 minutes, just have a look, because now I am going to talk about determination of charge and mass of an electron. Because this much story conclusion was that Thomson said that cathode ray is electron, it is a particle, it has got a charge because it is getting deflected by electric field, and it has mass because of all the experiment that he did, the spindle moved and all that. So he said that it has got a mass, and his endeavor was to find the charge and the mass. How much did he succeed? We'll see. determination of charge to mass ratio. See, he did not directly come to the idea of what you call, he did not directly come to the, trying to find out the charge separately and mass separately. The more that you have to understand, in those days, the hardware was not very developed. Now, they did not have such sophisticated equipments to weigh and all that. They did not have that. They use always some indirect means with the limitation of the hardware that they have. So what did Thomson do? Thomson created a modified cathode ray tube. So in this modified cathode ray tube, okay, it was something like this. Okay, and this part, so this is the front part, this was coated with zinc sulfide. So there was a coating of zinc sulfide. Then what did he do? He placed an electromagnet. Not a normal magnet, it's electromagnet, because he wanted to control the magnetic moment. And perpendicular to this, I cannot draw in a 2D diagram like this, but I am just explaining to you. Perpendicular to this, he placed two electrical plates. So this was magnet, this was electrical plates. Okay. So then what did he do? As usual, he connected, this was the anode, okay, and then this was connected to very high potential, and then he had a cathode over here. Okay, and then of course there was a pump to remove the air inside. Absolutely, there was a vacuum pump. So this was connected. Even today we have, this is called as cathode ray tube. Huh? This was to vacuum. Okay. Now what happened was, the cathode was something like this. Okay, that is better. Now what happened was, listen carefully, when he started, now I try to draw the frontal side, the diagram, how it looked. So this is how your screen will look now over here. So first, there was no electric field. So this was positive, this was negative. So there was no electric field. So when you started, what happened? The electrons simply moved in a straight line. So when they moved in a straight line, in the screen it looked like a dot, a green dot. Old TVs, if you've seen, when it starts, you can see a small dot, and then the dot will rise, and then you can see the complete picture. That was because the cathode ray tube was, it's a cathode ray tube. Now we have LED, LCD and all that. Old TVs have cathode ray tube. Then what he did, he started the electric current. The moment you start the electric current, what is going to happen to your cathode ray? The electrons which were generated is going to bend because it was affected. So now as far as the dot is concerned, the dot would have shifted its position. by this small distance r. By this small distance r. Then what he did, with the help of electromagnet, that means now your magnetic moment, the magnetism was controlled, because he could use an electromagnet, he could control it. So using this electromagnet, remember it's an electromagnet, huh? What he did was he put off the electric. So again the cathode ray was seen in this point. He started the electromagnet and found out the magnetic moment to bring it back to another distance r on the opposite side. So what is the conclusion of this? Or some books also say that he simply from this position brought it back to the original position. Even that is possible. The concept will remain the same. So what is the concept behind this? That the electrical force will be equal to the magnetic force. So what is electrical force? mv square upon r. What is this magnetic force? It will be B, the magnetic moment that you applied, E V, BeV upon mv square upon BeV. Now what happens is, listen carefully, this V and this. So what is M? M is the mass of electron. M is mass of electron. Then what is R? R is the distance. What is E? E is the charge on electron. What is V? Velocity. Velocity of electron. E, V, then B, magnetic moment. So now what we can say, if I put E by M will be equal to what? It will be V, the velocity, upon B into R. So these were all the experimental values we got. Is this point clear? So E by M value was found to be equal to 1.75 into 10 raised to minus 11 coulomb per gram. So now slowly we are coming to the real issue. Coulomb per gram. So this is one of the factual questions. See, whenever you are writing an entrance exam, you must realize that questions are of three types. One is called as a factual question, which is straight away some data taken from the textbook. The other is an analytical question, which would be a numerical, graph. These are analytical questions. And third could be a conceptual question. Now, how they convert a factual question into a conceptual question. So a direct question has been asked. You can see past papers. Direct question they have asked, E by M of electron is how much value? It's 1.75 into 10 raised to minus 11 coulomb per gram. Coulomb per gram. Now they can simply twist this a little. And then say what is the value of. So E by M is also called by another name, and that is called as specific charge. So specific, now instead of asking what is the charge to mass ratio of electron, which you will by heart and you will know it properly, that is 1.75 into 10 raised to minus 11 coulomb per gram. If the same question is now made little more conceptual, and they will ask what is the specific charge of electron. Now remember, in science the word specific means per unit. Like specific gravity, you are dividing it with respect to water. So here specific means per unit mass. So how many coulomb per gram? How many coulomb of charge per gram is? So that is specific charge. The answer remains the same. They are simply twisting factual into conceptual. So remember, either you say charge to mass ratio, or you say it is specific charge. This is 1.75 into 10 raised to minus 11 coulomb. So he did not get, his modification got us the charge to mass ratio. Is this point clear? Now what happened was, there was this scientist by the name Millikan. So there was this scientist by the name Millikan. So Millikan did an experiment. It's called as Millikan's oil drop experiment. See, I won't be telling you the actual experiment is because you have got this in your physics again. But what is the conclusion of Millikan's oil drop experiment? The conclusion of Millikan's oil drop experiment was that he found out the charge of an electron. So he found the charge. So what is the result of the Millikan oil drop experiment? That he found the charge of an electron. And how much was it? So charge of an electron was minus because it is negative charge. Is this clear? So don't think minus plus. If I say next I will talk about proton plus, it is higher value or lower value. It is just the charge. Charge is negative. So it's minus 1.6 into 10 raised to minus 19 coulomb. So found out this. It was very easy to find the mass of electron, because see, what do you have got? E upon E by m is what? E will cancel. 1 upon 1 by m will be m. So this is nothing but mass of electron. So charge of an electron was 1.6 into 10 raised to minus 19 coulomb. Coulomb is capital C. And E by m was 1.75 into 10 raised to minus 11 coulomb per gram. So this gave rise to, so indirectly, they did not take a weighing machine and then found out the mass of electron. Indirectly. So they found the charge to mass ratio, they found the charge, and from that they derived the mass of an electron as 9.1 into 10 raised to minus 31 of a gram. So what is important from the entrance exam point of view is that you have to remember charge to mass ratio, or what we call as specific charge. Charge of an electron, that should not be a problem, but mass of electron 9.1 into 10 raised to minus 31 of a gram. So these are three data which can come as a factual question in entrance exam.